Today I'm going to be working on my Honda. Going to be changing out the CV joints on both the driver and the passenger side. I recently did a little road trip on it and I started getting a lot of vibration on the passenger side. Go ahead, get right to it. I got to take these hubcaps off in order to get the axle nut for the CV joint, and so we'll get to that right away. So let's get at it and jack this car up, take the lug nuts off, take the hubcaps off. So the hubcap is taken off. Now could get to the center nut, the axle nut, and right here I have a socket. It's a 1 1/4 of an inch. I know the socket is supposed to be a metric, but this is the only socket I really have, and it fits pretty good. It's not going to ruin the nut or anything like that. So just going to use this. Have a little adapter on here and just use the brake bar. There we go, right there. The nut is off and could fully jack up this side of the car. So the passenger side is all jacked up, have it on jack stands, so it's safe to work on. Now I gotta go ahead and get the driver's side. Now we could start working on the suspension itself in order to start getting the CV axle out of its place here. So first thing I'm going to do is loosen up the tie rod just so we're able to move the wheel hub back and forth here. There's a cotter pin got to go ahead and take out real quick. Now take off the nut for the tie rod. It's going to be a 17. You want to go ahead and grab like a hammer. I have a mini sledgehammer. You want to just hit the knuckle right here to loosen up that tie rod. It'll just pop out of place. Now I got the tie rod off, able to move the knuckle back and forth here. Next thing I'm going to take off, there's going to be a cotter pin and a nut as well. The same thing right under here for the lower ball joint. So I'm going to get that real quick. I already loosened up the nut. The nut is still on there, just on there by a few threads. I left it on there because I'm gonna have to hit the lower control arm in order to pop that ball joint out. The next thing I'm gonna work on is the fork here, the suspension fork. Here is the suspension fork. Gonna be taking out this lower nut and bolt here. So you're going to get it from both sides. This side and the other side is going to be the same, 17 mil. And also, you don't really have to, but I always like to, just to get it completely out the way. Going to get this 14 right here. That's going to be able to move the fork out of the way whenever you get the CV joint. Going to make it a lot easier to get it out. So the suspension fork is loose, that is out of the way, able to be moved. And so again, I loosened up the lower ball joint, and so now I got to loosen it up. I'm going to give it some hits with the mini sledgehammer in order to help loosen it on up. So let's get at it. I was kind of blocking myself with the fork, so I just kind of put it out of the way so I could lift up on the wheel hub in order to get that lower ball joint out and free up this CV axle. The way, CV axle's right there. So can't take the CV axle out just yet because still got to drain the oil out of the transmission or else it start dripping everywhere. What I'm gonna do is get started on the other side, get the suspension loose, get the CV axle loose before we drain the transmission. You guys could see on the passenger side, the one that really needed to be changed out, CV joint basically already falling out. It was just falling on out, man. So this is trash. The CV axle fell out. We still have this other piece that's in the transmission. There's still oil in the transmission, so before I pull out the CV axles, let's go ahead and drain it. Right here is the drain plug. You just get your ratchet or breaker bar that fits, and this is going to drain out the oil. So let's get to it. The oil is removed from the transmission. We could start taking out the CV axles. Sometimes they're a little bit hard, so you might have to try to get something behind there to try to pry it. Don't really put too much force, just try to do the best that you can. There it goes. You guys saw I just got a big screwdriver, put it behind there, give it a few taps. So here's the other piece. Got this other piece that was in the transmission. Just real easily put a big screwdriver, just do that sort of motion, and then it got loose. And then spin it just so you evenly try to yank it out. You know, if you try to pull it out one way, it's going to get cockeyed and it's going to get stuck. So you gotta pry it one way, and then spin it, and then pry it the other way so it evenly comes out, and it shouldn't be an issue for you right there. These are obviously very old. These are just going to go right into the trash. What I need to do before even installing some new ones, I need to clean up where the boot has ripped all up in here. I don't know how good you guys are able to see it, but there's grease that just got slung all around. I need to get some mineral spirits, some cleaning solution, and just scrub up on in here with the toothbrush. And the same for over here. I'm gonna just clean it up as much as I can. So let's go ahead and get at it. I got it pretty clean in here. If you guys could take a look. To me, it's pretty clean for what it is. Now, real quick, what I'm gonna do is take off the air box and the hose, just so I could clean up a little bit on top of the transmission. Just get a little bit extra cleaner. I'm just gonna do that just as an extra effort to clean up. So things are cleaned up top. You can see it's cleaned up back there, and by the speed sensor, since that's where I'm going to be refilling my transmission at, cleaned it on up. And so just basically the front of the transmission is still a bit dirty here. And also I did clean up on the driver's side where the axle is going to go. Right in here, cleaned up, cleaned the subframe, cleaned up around the motor and on the transmission. So that is good to go. Next thing I'm going to do is take out the seals for the CV axles on the transmission. Take those on out because I'm going to be replacing them. I took those seals out. Here's the passenger side and here is the driver's side. Here's the brand new seals from Honda. Take a look at it. That's the driver's side, and then the passenger side, that's going to be the part number. As you guys could tell right here, opened it up and it's the exact same. So I'm just going to put a little bit of oil on the outside here and on the transmission and get these pressed on in. I do have a tool in order to push seals on in, and I'll be using that tool and show you guys that right now. This is the tool I use to install the seals. You just find the one that would meet up with the edge and the seal, so you can lay it flat on there where it's supposed to be. And as well, you could turn them over. They have like a tapered edge on them, so you could use both sides. And then I just used a plastic dead blow hammer, and it seems to do the job. So just put a little oil around it, and of course, you know, kind of just slip on in there with the help of this. So that's the tool I use. You guys could find this. This is called the Bearing Race and Seal Bush Driver Set by OMT, Orion Motor Tech. Here is the brand new CV axles I had purchased from Rock Auto. These are GSP, the brand GSP. And the part number right here, we have the driver side, NCV 36517, and then the passenger side, which is the one I really needed, NCV 36516. So check it out. Here is the brand new CV axles. I mean, they feel good. I checked, you know, for any sort of play, anything. They feel real good, as they should, brand new. So of course these look like they're going to do the job. They're going to hold up. Gotta get these installed into the car. Just get the teeth aligned up with the transmission and just give it like a, you know, a nice firm push into the transmission. The CV axle is in there. I did have to align the teeth with the transmission, put it on in there, and once it's in there, you're going to kind of like pull it back. It's not going to pull out because the CV axle kind of expands in this section and in the other section on the other end, and so you're going to kind of pull it back and then give it a nice shove on in there, and you're going to hear it and you're going to feel it once it's all the way in. Next, I'm going to be putting the suspension back all together. The CV axle did come with a new nut for that center nut, and so just going to be putting everything on back together just real loosely, and then we will go over the torque specs for everything that we had taken off. The first thing I'm going to be putting on is the suspension fork, and going to have to be putting the CV axle here in order to get everything in there all the way. That's on there. Just going to real loosely put the bolt on there so it doesn't slip off. Now I'm going to be putting the CV axle into the knuckle, but before I do that, I'm going to be putting on some anti-seize here, some copper based anti-seize, just because over time these can get stuck onto the knuckle and be real hard to take off off the hub. Just as a preventative to save yourself the hassle, go ahead and put that on. So the CV axle is aligned. Next, going to try to put the lower ball joint into the lower control arm. Alright, so what I had to do is loosen up the sway bar. I got the bottom nut, had to get it on top with the 12, and then the bottom was a 12, and got that loose in order to drop the lower control arm more, in order for me to get the lower ball joint in. Since I'm working by myself, it's a little bit harder. Of course, if you had someone else with you, they could probably, you know, drop the lower control arm while you're lifting up the knuckle and everything here. Right after I got that in, I did put in the bolt for the suspension fork. So that is in there, and real loosely I did put the nut on there. The bolt for the fork up on top is in there real loose, and the tie rod as well, just put that on in there, and the center nut for the CV axle. But the only thing that's not in as of now is just the sway bar. But I am going to get to the passenger side, put everything on just as I did over here. Everything on the passenger side has been put on loosely. On this side I didn't have to loosen the sway bars since it's already unbolted on the other side. This one is able to move pretty easily. One thing I do before putting in the lower ball joint is put in the lower bolt here for the suspension fork, and that just helps keep that lower control arm down, so you're able to go ahead and mess with the knuckle here and get that lower ball joint in. After that, just loosely put on everything. Let's go back onto the driver's side. On the driver's side here, since the other sway bar and lower control arm has been put on the suspension, the sway bar is back into the position in order to bolt everything on down. So just put that lower bushing on in and the nut on the bottom here. After you get that started, just get the two 12s in order to tighten everything on down. So one up on top and then one in the bottom. The next thing I'm going to tighten is the tie rod here to 35 foot-pounds. I'll just put in that cotter pin. Next, I'm going to tighten up this lower suspension fork, the bolt, to 47 foot-pounds. And now the top bolt for the fork here, and that will be to 35 foot-pounds. Now the lower ball joint, going to be tightening that one up to 40 foot-pounds to 45, just again to line up that castle nut for the cotter pin. So that's going to be it for now on the driver's side. Let's get to the passenger side. Real quick, I did throw on the wheel and finger tight just the two lug nuts onto the wheel, and got the jack here supporting the car. I did take out the jack stand. I'm gonna go ahead and let the car down so the tire's making contact, and I'll be able to tighten up the CV axle nut, the center nut here, to 135 foot-pounds. Alright guys, so that is how you put in the CV axles into your Honda, into your Civic. The last thing you got to do is put oil into the transmission, and where I like to put oil at, I take out the speed sensor here in the back of the transmission, held on by 110, get a long funnel, put in that oil, and put the speed sensor back in. Make sure you put in the speed sensor by hand. It goes all the way down by hand, because I've tried to put in the 10 and try to make it go down, but you just end up breaking the speed sensor. So that's one thing to be aware of. You can see right here from the top, the CV axle is in place, transmission has been cleaned up, and also last thing you got to do is put in the air box. Now as for me, I'm going to be changing out the oil in the next video, so if you guys want to go ahead and check out the next video how everything will be done, I'll be changing out a seal for the shift linkage there. So go ahead and check that on out, guys. But if you guys have any questions, drop a comment down below. Like, comment, subscribe to the channel, because I'm going to catch you on the next one, player.